Welcome everybody to the video interview series posted by the Free Turkish Press. Today we have Henri Barkey with us. He is the Cohen Professor of International Relations at Lehigh University, as well as Adjunct Senior Fellow for Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's here today, of course, to talk to us about the Turkish elections. We are 4 days away from the runoff election this Sunday. We came out of the first round. The opposition candidate, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, got about 44.89% of the vote, and incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan got 49.5% of the vote. So neither candidate having received 50%, we are moving to a runoff. First question for you, Henri, today is, how would you characterize the mood of the opposition going into this runoff from your perspective?
Look, I think the opposition is probably extremely demoralized because when you look at the polls before the first round, it seemed like at the very least that Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu was going to come in first, and that there was even the possibility that he might win in the first round. And this was actually a very prevalent view and sentiment among many opposition members and supporters, especially among the intelligentsia. And in fact, the polls were all wrong, at least to the extent that we assume that the elections were actually free and there was no manipulation of the tallies. We don't know that. We may never know. But so from, let's say, getting 49%, they got 44.9%. So that's a great disappointment for them. And I think as a result, they are very demoralized. There are probably tensions within the coalition itself. And there's also, of course, a fear that not all their supporters will show up this coming Sunday. And the likelihood is that Erdoğan is going to win the election and maybe even have a 54 to, let's say, 46% win, which would be very empowering to him. And so it remains to be seen. We haven't seen the proof of the pudding, so to say. And so we'll find out on Sunday. But it looks like Erdoğan is going to win. And I think people were way too optimistic about the chances of the opposition winning, only because for Erdoğan, this is a do or die election. There's no way he was going to allow him face. He would never allow himself to be defeated. So I think the Turkish pollsters and the opposition have a lot to answer. I mean, the opposition, and we can talk about this also, the opposition made serious mistakes. I mean, they really made serious mistakes.
What kinds of mistakes? What would you say would be the top? What are the top three mistakes?
Well, I would say.
And also, actually, just before you answer, I'd also be curious to know, speaking of mistakes, what you think of sort of the nationalist turn that Kılıçdaroğlu seems to have taken in the days since the first round, and how that might affect things going into Sunday. But go ahead.
Well, Kılıçdaroğlu seems to have made a deal today, actually, as this morning, our time, with an extreme right-wing party, and that's not going to sit well with the Kurds because the Victory Party of Ümit Özdağ is an extreme nationalist or racist party that has always targeted the Kurds, and so that may actually increase the number of people who sit it out the second round. Now, having said that, I mean, it is really in the interest of the Kurds to come out and vote against Mr. Erdoğan because in that case, this is the devil you know. He is not better than the devil you don't know. And I would say that it will it may lead some people to stay at home, but it's leading against their interests. But we'll find out. Even if everybody who voted last time show up again, it will not be enough to defeat Mr. Erdogan. And this coalition with this extreme right-winger is not going to bring them much.
You don't think it's bringing the votes to his side that he thinks it is, Kılıçdaroğlu?
He doesn't have that many votes to bring.
So what's the
reason they made a deal is because in the first round there was a third candidate who got over 5%, and Kılıçdaroğlu tried to woo him, but this guy ended up supporting Erdoğan. He made his announcement on Monday. He supported Erdoğan, and so they're trying to counterbalance him with the victory party of Mr. Ümit Özdağ. But the guy who won 5%. It doesn't necessarily mean that his 5% will necessarily vote for Mr. Erdoğan, but we don't know. But it is psychologically something that helps Erdoğan at the expense of Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu.
So, as nice as it is to dwell, I guess, in the possibility of predicting what might happen on Sunday, I think you and I are both in the pessimist camp. I think we think that very little possibility that that Erdoğan doesn't prevail. So, given that, I want to talk a little bit about what we see for Turkey in the next 5 years, in at least 5 more years with Mr. Erdoğan, as you call him. So, first question is: do you think, do you think that he's going to see this election as a mandate? Is he going to use it to consolidate his power further? And if and when he does, what do you think that looks like?
Well, it's difficult to see him consolidating more power than he already has. I mean, he now controls every single institution of the country. What he doesn't control is maybe every nook and cranny in the country. I mean, there are still press outlets that are independent, that are in opposition to him. There are academics, intellectuals, civil society organizations that are still opposed to him, and they are alive and well at the moment. They are the ones who are probably going to pay a price in the days after or in the years after this election. But fundamentally speaking, he controls the judiciary, which is the most important institution. There is no law and order, rule of law, I should say, in Turkey. If Erdoğan wants somebody to be in prison, he'll get him in prison. It doesn't matter what the evidence is, or if there is any evidence, or if there is no evidence, they'll manufacture it. And I know that very well from my own experience. But that said, it's not just the judiciary; it's also the security forces, the central bank, the press, increasingly the universities will come under his control, especially the state-owned universities. Think of the two gems of Turkish state-owned universities, the Boğaziçi University or Bosphorus University and the Middle East Technical University, also known as the Orta Doğu University. Both of these are going to suffer. Boğaziçi has already started. I mean, they've gotten rid of a lot of professors there, and increasingly they're replacing serious faculty members with party hacks. So that's an institution that's going to suffer. So you're going to find a state that is more like, certainly like Orban's Hungary, but increasingly it will become a state that will be speaking with one voice where there is no dissent. Maybe Belarus, you can think of Belarus as another. I mean, Turkey is not Belarus. I'm not saying Turkey is Belarus today, but Will it be going there? We'll find out soon. That's so consolidating more control is not the right way to look at it, because he already does have that. It's just going to be fine-tuning it,
tightening the screws.
Exactly. Remember one thing about Turkey is that this is the only country I know where 20,000 people were charged with criminally charged for insulting the president. Right. Yeah. So if I were to say here that I don't think President Erdoğan knows nothing about economics, just said it, right? He can, if he wants to, if I was in Turkey, charge me with insulting him because I said he doesn't know anything about economics. And can I give him an economics test and ask him to answer questions and see if he actually does know economics? No, I can't do that. So,
unfortunately, I think reality might be the economics test for Erdoğan.
That's fair enough.
We can come to that.
I mean, we've already seen his economic policies in play.
So I do want to talk about that, and I want to get to that in a second. But quickly before we leave, the idea of a crackdown. Do you not foresee the possibility of a post-election crackdown? Maybe not as extreme as in 2016 after the coup, but there's been a lot of campaigning. There's been a lot of rhetoric in Turkey. So you're saying he can't consolidate power any further. I understand what you're saying, but do you see any kind of reaction after Sunday? Do you see any kind of retribution for opposition figures?
That will come, but it won't be after Sunday. I mean, not immediately. Right? It will come down he cannot. When he wins, he's going to try to look magnanimous and try to say this is one country, and even though he's been saying really amazingly negative things about the opposition, basically accusing them of treason and being terrorists, you name it. So, he said all these things, but you don't go for a crackdown immediately. The crackdown will come. It may be in a couple of months. It may be in 4 months. I don't know, but there will be a crackdown for sure, because Erdoğan is a very vindictive person. He doesn't take slights. He doesn't like to be slighted, and therefore anybody who engages in that, as I said, look, 20,000 people have been charged with insulting the president, and so you can expect that there will be a harsh clampdown at some point. It won't be all in one go. It's not going to be like one night. They will all be arrested. It will be slowly.
So back to those economic tests that Erdoğan will face. Obviously he's made a lot of campaign promises throughout the run-up to the election. So I'm wondering what you think the fallout will be from those.
The Turkish economic situation is very dire. In the run-up to the elections, both first and second round, they really manipulated the numbers, they manipulated the exchange rate, they manipulated bank deposits. They won't allow people to buy foreign exchange in large amounts. You can buy $20, but you can't buy $500 million or $10 million, because they're worried about the lack of foreign currency reserves that they have, and second, that it will impact the Turkish lira. So for the last few months now, they've been, especially in the last couple of weeks, they've been playing this kabuki game of trying to hide the fact that they don't have any reserves to support the currency, and at the same time make it look like there is not a great demand for selling Turkish liras and buying foreign exchange. But it's been an amazing game they've been playing and manipulating the markets on this. But you can't do this forever, right? The Turkish economy needs to be able to operate in a. If you live in a capitalist world, you have to not obey, shall we say, all the capitalist rules and laws, but you have to be able to operate in that atmosphere. And what they've done until recently is not sustainable. Therefore, he has to change policy. The question is, when is he going to do it? My suspicion is he's not going to do it immediately. In part because we are going into the summer, and the summer is always, in many ways, the easiest part of the year because you don't have to worry about buying oil and gas to heat houses and buildings, etc. So your demand for energy goes down. So since Turkey is an energy importer, a large energy importer, that helps them. Secondly, it's also the summer. Tourists come, right? And Turkey is relatively cheap. And for some tourists, like Russian tourists, Turkey is now the only destination they can go to. I mean, they're not going to go to the Italian Riviera. I mean, you can be sure of that. So they'll come to Turkey. So Turkey is likely to make a great deal of revenue. I mean, earn a lot of foreign exchange through tourism this summer. So that will cushion Erdoğan for the next maybe 3 months. After that, I mean, I think the reckoning will come in the fall, in October, November, when he has to finance his foreign trade. He has to finance imports, and that's going to be far more difficult. The question is, what does he do then? Erdoğan has been a believer in low interest rates because he has this idea that if you lower interest rates, then you also lower the rate of inflation. And the rate of inflation, which was official rate was over 100%, is now down to the top 45, 46. Nobody believes those numbers. I mean, nobody believes that the official numbers that the Turkish state provides are accurate. They think they've been manipulated. And this is, I know this by talking to people who are in finance, etc. That said, the real inflation rate may actually be above 80% or 90%. We don't know. And of course, the inflation rate is not uniform. I mean, food prices may go up faster. Rents and housing prices have been very high in Turkey and have gone up very high, have gone up a lot. So it is, I would say that it depends on the sector how inflation affects you. But rent and food are two things that affect the majority of the population. So that's actually very critical. So let's assume he manages to get through the summer. Then he's going to have to decide whether or not to go back to orthodox economic policy. Now, he's very committed to a low interest rate policy. He genuinely believes that. And he surrounded himself with people who also tell him that he's always right and believe the same thing. But here's the reality. 26 months ago, the then central bank governor increased interest rate overnight, I think it was on a Thursday, by 200 basis points, i.e. 2%. It's a very sharp raise. Bond traders, investment consultants, everybody was very impressed with that. They thought finally Turkey was on the right way. Finally, Turkey was going to take its economic problem seriously. And in fact, you look at Turkish bonds; they all went up in value, etc., etc. That was a Thursday. But I think Friday night, the central bank governor was fired. because that was the last independent central bank governor Turkey had, because he did it without probably telling the president. And he did it because that's what central banks do. I mean, the American central bank leader, Mr. Powell, doesn't tell Biden what he's going to do if he increases or decreases interest rates, right? That's not your job. You're supposed to be independent. But of course, Erdoğan couldn't stand that, so he fired him. And of course, the Turkish, not only the reaction was terrible come Monday morning, because Friday night, you have the weekend in between. Monday morning, Turkish assets tanked. But most importantly, there's probably been almost no foreign direct investment, large numbers. There've been some, of course, since then, right? And there's been portfolio investments. That means people buying assets or people buying stocks, maybe, or especially buying real estate. But that there has not been investment in factories and stuff. But that's what is the most important way out for the Turkish economy. They need to rebuild their manufacturing sector. Turkey has actually a very dynamic manufacturing sector. It is amazingly well located because it is on the edge of Europe. We are in a geopolitical situation where you're seeing that Western investments are moving out of China, maybe going to India, going to Vietnam, but they're also coming closer to places like Europe, right? They call this friendshoring. So because you don't trust the Chinese anymore, or you don't want to be completely dependent on the Chinese, so investments are looking for places that are friendly to them, places that are reliable politically, and places that are obviously close to the markets. So Turkey really needs to increase its investments in the manufacturing sector because Turkey exports an enormous amount of goods. Even today, it has come down because of the economic crisis, but to Europe, especially to Europe and also to the United States. It has also a customs union agreement with Europe, which helps Turkey with exporting. But I don't know if Erdoğan really understands this, and he's not taking advantage of it. I mean, if anybody who's president now and knew something about economics would try to take advantage of this. I mean, look at the Indians. I mean, they lured Apple to come to and start building factories. The Vietnamese are trying to get chip factory. I mean, everybody's trying to take advantage of this major shift that's taking place geopolitically in terms of the global economy, except Turkey. And yet Turkey is the country that's best suited for doing that. Anyway, so he has to change policies. The problem is that people don't trust Erdoğan. People don't believe Erdoğan will actually, if he implements change, that the change will be of long duration. Just like in the example I gave you about the last independent central bank governor who was fired a day after he raised interest rates. People think that if Erdoğan says tomorrow, oh, yes, I'll increase interest rates by, let's say 2%, 200 basis points, they have no confidence that a week later he won't bring it down again, right? So for foreign capital to come back into Turkey in significant amount, right, they need a message. They need to see something that will tell them that Erdoğan is in for the long haul, which is also the reason I believe that if he wants to set the sail right when it comes to the economy, he needs to make an agreement with the IMF, which of course he has belittled and insulted and so on and so forth during the campaign. Doesn't matter. Look, Erdoğan will win. He can do anything he wants after this. he has 5 years. You usually introduce the bitter medicine in your first year, because by the time your fifth year comes, people will have seen the benefits of it, and so on and so forth. Now, of course, the assumption here is also that Erdoğan is not going to run again. I mean, constitutionally, he cannot run again. He probably should not have run this time, but he reinterpreted the constitution to his own advantage. What we don't know is whether or not in the third year of his last term, somebody in parliament will suddenly come up with the idea, we have a president who's so good that maybe we should change the constitution so that he can run again. And guess what? Everybody will applaud. I mean, my guess is in 3 years from now, we'll see an attempt at changing the constitution so he can run again. All right. Erdoğan is a workaholic. I mean, the guy really works hard. You can't take that away from him. I mean, he travels. He's phenomenal. I mean, people say, oh, he looks old, etc. For somebody who maintains the schedule that he does, he's really amazing. And therefore, I would not be surprised if they eventually change the constitution. So the point I'm trying to make here is that if that is what's in his mind, then he needs to introduce reforms within the first year.
So do you think it's possible he tries for an IMF deal?
It's hard for me to say yeah or nay, only in the sense that, logically speaking, he should go for it. If an IMF deal will release huge amounts of resources that will come Turkey's way, but it will also send a message to private investors that Turkey is open for business. At the moment, as I said earlier, people don't trust Erdoğan. So logic says to me, yes. And logic also says to me, it doesn't matter what he said about the IMF during the campaign. I mean, his campaign was a campaign that was run against the United States. I mean, he basically, blamed us for everything. And, Soylu said that Turkey is really at war. That's the Minister of Interior, with the United States. I mean, given the fact that the United States and Turkey are members of the same alliance, that's a little bit cheeky, to put it mildly. But I would say that he can get away with it. He can get away with anything he wants. Look, this is a guy who lambasted Assad and the leader of Syria, MBS, the guy in charge of Saudi Arabia, Sisi in Egypt, and he's trying to shake hands with Assad. He was desperate to have a photo op with Assad. He's buddies now again with MBS, and so what if he said something about the IMF? He probably will turn around and say, the IMF begged us to give us to offer Turkey a plan, and they gave us such good deals. It doesn't make sense for us not to say. I mean, he can't. There's no opposition press for sure of importance in Turkey anymore, and probably there'll be even less 6 months from now. So he can sell anything.
Yeah. So you touched on at the end there, my last question for you, which is of course what everybody in the West is always asking, which is foreign policy. Will there be a reset with the West? Can we expect to see any kind of outreach on Erdogan's part? I mean, so you mentioned a lot of his campaign rhetoric. I think on the day of the election, you tweeted this, right? That the headline for one of the biggest government rags was and we'll have an answer for Biden at the ballot boxes or something along those lines. But he's also made some signals. I think on a CNN interview, was it yesterday or a couple days ago? He signaled potentially, what was it, a reset on. So he said, whoever it is in whoever the U.S. administration is will want to work with them, sort of something conciliatory. And there was possibly a hint from his spokesperson about leaving the S-400 program. So I guess my last question for you is, how do you see him? How do you square away those sorts of little hints he's been dropping about a reset with the campaign rhetoric that we saw so much of? Do you have a prediction as to which way he will go?
Oh, he will make a U-turn on foreign policy as well. I mean, all this stuff that he's been saying about the United States, he will just make people forget it, and he will essentially go to the United States and Europe, because those are the places that will provide him with the funding. I mean, remember, there's also the question of the earthquake, which we did not mention. The earthquake cost Turkey something between 8 to 12% of GDP, of gross domestic product. I mean, that's an enormous amount. That's $100 billion. They don't have that money to rebuild. Not to mention that he has made all these promises. Somebody told me that actually you can now retire in Turkey on certain, not everybody, but you can retire at the age of 46 and then get, for another 46 years, you can get a pension. I mean, how are you going to pay that? So it's, they really need to finance, as I said earlier, the deficits, both budgetary and foreign currency, reserves. They have to find foreign direct investment. They have to get cash into Turkey, because, this is unsustainable. And that cash can only come from the United States and Europe. When I say to all the IMF, right, it's not going to come from China unless you think that part of the money that the IMF gives you is also Chinese money, Chinese contribution, I should say. But the Chinese are not going to come and invest in Turkey if they also think that the conditions are not right. The only investments that we have seen so far is rich people, especially in the Gulf, buying nice properties in Turkey. That increases property prices in Turkey, but it doesn't. It provides you with foreign currency, but it doesn't create jobs. And so Turkey will need jobs program, and it will need to streamline its domestic economy. And so the IMF program, but here's what I'm sure they must be aware of this in Turkey, that unless US markets, let's say Wall Street, the British markets, the European markets, the sentiment there is, look, Turkey is a place to do business. Nobody will invest in Turkey. I mean, somebody has to whisper, so to say, the right thing. But if you are somebody who is going to invest, has money to invest, and wants to build a factory, let's say a car part factory, why would you go to Turkey if you don't trust the Turkish economic leadership, right? But you also want to hear not from Erdoğan that things are great. You need to hear from your peers on Wall Street that, hey, Turkey is a serious place. So for people on Wall Street to have a positive view, it also means that U.S. government has to have a positive view of Turkish economic developments. It means U.S. Congress has to be, shall we say, on the positive side of this image. Whereas today, I've never seen the American Congress being so anti-Turkish as it is today. I mean, and I've watched and followed this for a very long time. These, some of which are psychological factors, will not change unless you implement the U-turn in your foreign policy. And in your foreign policy, that means you're going to let Sweden into NATO in June at the summit, or July, the Vilnius summit. That means you have to not invade Syria. That means you have to not fly over Greek islands and project your power over the Aegean. That means that there is a great deal of sanction busting in Turkey, and that's part of it is understandable because Turkey is Russia's neighbor. You can't control everything, and also if you can buy cheap gas from Russia, well, it's hard to say no to that. But there is some unhappiness in Washington and Europe that Turkey is increasingly becoming a major conduit for Russian goods, and for a conduit for goods coming into Russia, leaving Russia. So they will have to not completely shut the door. I mean, as I said earlier, it's impossible to do that, and it's understandable that there'll be some natural. If you've been buying Russian oil for all your life, you're not going to suddenly move pipelines around. So you have to go on buying Russian oil and Russian gas. I mean, so people understand that, but it's the other stuff, that's going through Turkey into Russia that important. So they will have to clamp down on that. So those are probably the things that Turkey will need to do if it wants to, shall we say, be in the good graces of the West. And so if it doesn't do that, that's not going to happen, right? The United States can also, as I said, extend its hand by, we can say, we'll sell you the F-16s that you want to buy. We will help you with your economic program, and if you go for an IMF program, we'll support you. We'll encourage businesses to invest in Turkey. I mean, yes, there's a lot the United States can do, but for that, Erdoğan has to move. I mean, he has to move. We don't have to move. And for the first time in a long time, the United States is in a very good bargaining position, and he should make the most out of it. I would add one other thing. I mean, I would say to Mr. Erdoğan that enough of this anti-Americanism, because Turkey is the country where, among the allies, anti-Americanism has reached the highest level. But so we are in the same alliance. I mean, we are supposedly, in case of, God forbid, a war or something, Turkish and American soldiers are supposed to fight together. And if you have a population that believes, 70% of the population believes that the greatest threat to Turkey is the United States, if I was an American decision maker, would I want to have my soldiers fight alongside with people who think I'm the enemy? So, I mean, he needs to move on that. And unfortunately, in the United States, the tendency has always been to be soft on the Turks. Turkey is too important. And therefore, Erdoğan, especially Erdoğan, has gotten away with murder. And that has to change. But because of the economic crisis, I think we're in a position now for the first time where we can say to Erdoğan, this is what you have to do, and this is the time. And among other things, I mean, and Europeans maybe have to take the lead on this, on human rights. I mean, stop him from throwing people into jail just because he doesn't like them. The European Court of Human Rights decisions have to be respected. Turkish constitution says they have to be. Osman Kavala is in jail. Selahattin Demirtas is in jail for no reason whatsoever. It's not, I'm pointing at these two because they are the kind of the most visible faces, but there are tens of thousands of people who are in jail for no reason except that, either Erdoğan or his cronies have found a reason to jail them. Look, you want to be part of the West, you also have to be, nobody's perfect. I mean, the United States by far, as we've seen in recent years, is not perfect. We make mistakes, but we have to be able to correct our mistakes. And Turkey has made mistakes, and it's time to correct some of them. But the critical thing is that both the United States and Europe are in a very good bargaining position, and they can essentially tell Erdoğan that he's not going to get a penny until he moves on certain things.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we will end here. But thank you so much for talking to me today. This is Madeleine Joelson and Henri Barkey for the Free Turkish Press, and we will be continuing with our interviews through the election. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Henri.